Good evening. We are live on Dove Valley Deep Divers. I'm messing it up already, Eric. Fire this guy. But we want to bring in our other Facebook pages, which are Mile High Huddle and the Mile High Huddle podcast, daily Denver Broncos coverage. So we'll let the stream breathe just a bit while we bring everybody in here. So we get everybody under one roof. And welcome in, everybody. This is the Dove Valley Deep Divers, as always on a Friday night. What is a little different, though, is the faces that you might see. I haven't been on this show in a very long time. I'm your co-host, Scott Kennedy. You might know me from Broncos for Breakfast. Among other things, I'm sitting in for Lance tonight. And over here on this side is Erick Trickel, who has been on a little bit of a trip. So welcome back, Eric. It is good to see you, and thanks for having me on tonight.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for joining me. I mean, counting this week, the last three shows of Dove Valley Divers has been a mess. 2 weeks ago, we had technical issues. Chad had to fill in. Last week, I was out of state. I was actually, at a Mexican restaurant having some drinks. And so Chad filled in for that, and now you. But it's good to have you on, and it's good to be back. It was a nice vacation, nice step away. But, it's good to be back on the show.
It's a good time to do that after the NFL draft. I'm sure that was not an accident on your timing. Now, I have a question. Did you get sick after the draft?
No, I did. I got a little bit of a sinus cold. A little bit of
It happens every time. If you were an accountant, you'd be sick on April 17th. Yeah. It was whenever you go, like your body says, okay, you're done now. Now you're going to rest. I'm going to make you rest. You're going to get sick. So it doesn't surprise me as much time as you put in with the NFL draft that you may have had a little something going on as well. But welcome in everybody else who has come in and joined us in the chat today. And I want to remind you, it helps bring in more people on a Friday night if you hit like and share and email the link to a friend. We'd love to have more Broncos fans in here. And we actually have lots of news to go over, Eric, with OTAs going on, some media availability, some quotes from Sean Payton. Oh, my God. But for me, the biggest story of the entire week is that running back showing up and doing some drills, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I've always questioned when will we get him back. It's always seemed like middle of the season. I'm still not 100% sure he's there for the beginning of the season. But I think we could definitely roll out that he'll miss the majority of the season. About week 3, week 4, I mean, getting him back, doing some drills now, it's a really positive sign for his progress with his rehab.
I agree 100% because we're still May. It's still May, June, July, August, part of September. You're basically 3.5 months away from going. And Javonte Williams is already out there doing light football activities. He's got a knee brace. So what? I expect him to play in a knee brace for the rest of this season, maybe the rest of his career, to be honest with you. No big deal. Offensive linemen, they all wear knee braces when they're out there. He's a power back, so it doesn't bother me. But having him out there, what a boost to this team. And what an example that he has set by – I mean, it's a medical marvel that he's able to be out there. I've said a zillion times, Eric, people say, oh, ACLs are, fairly no. A full, and I mean full-on recovery from an ACL, if you get there, is 18 months. Yeah. It's a year and a half. Yes, you can get out there and do some things within 6 to 9 months, but it's not the same. He could be out there full speed again in 10 months. It's really absolutely incredible, Eric. And for me, that's the biggest story. We keep talking about running backs. Who else could they bring in? How about Pookie Williams?
Yeah. And one thing too, with how remarkable his recovery is, it wasn't just the ACL. If I remember right, he tore or partially tore 2 other ligaments in his knee. And it's just such a dangerous injury for running backs because of the length of it. I mean, they were, former NFL team doctors and everything that were saying this is close to a 2-year recovery for this. And here he is, he's back. When he does get out there on the field, I'm still not expecting, the Javonte Williams of the last couple of years before he got hurt. But hopefully we see the positive signs staying forward, that he's able to stay out there on the field and still do well. Speed wasn't a big aspect to his game, as you touched on. He's more of a power back, so you're not risking losing that speed a little bit. So it's just a positive sign, and it's so good for the morale of this team after the year they had and all the injuries that they had. Seeing the worst one of the bunch come back in May and start getting back on the football field.
Yeah, and I when I mentioned the ACL in 18 months, that was a prelude to the point that you just made for me, because I forgot, was it wasn't just an ACL, it was ACL and then some. Yeah. And it might still be a 2-year for a full recovery. Like I said, in 18 months, you can get out there and do football activities and play within nine months or so, but you're not your previous best for a good year and a half. It takes some time. We've seen it a zillion times. Most recently, I would say Cortland Sutton is the most recent. Yeah, he was back in the next year, but was he back? Or is he back? is the next question. Has he fully recovered? Is he still fully recovered? I think he is physically. I just think that some of the other stuff was going on last year. I am not judging anybody based on last year, except maybe Nathaniel Hackett. Want to say hello to some folks in the chat now that we've opened up just a little bit, and the algorithms have started and the alerts have started to reach everybody. Our numbers are climbing. I want to say hello to Dylan Von Arx. I don't get to do this enough because I'm usually behind the scenes, and Dylan's working in the mornings when I'm on. So I want to say thank you to everything that you do for this to help moderate the chat and keep everybody, somewhat in line. Dylan, he says, "Sup Broncos country, make sure you hit that like button on the way in, share on all platforms, and subscribe if you haven't already." We broke 19,000 subscribers on YouTube, Eric, last week. So that's a big number. I can't wait to tell everybody, hey, we'll have to do something. I'll talk Chad into it. It won't be that hard. I won't twist his arm or anything. We'll do some sort of something when we hit 20,000. It won't be that far away. David McElrath coming in, also known as the Papa Bear. He says, "Good evening, Broncos country." Lance, well, it's not Lance today. Eric, that's this guy. Dylan's here, and Deacon Scott, that's me. MHH for life. Buckham ×3 and Denver Broncos for life. Thank you for the support, David. Help keep the light on. And, after a long day, my forehead gets extra shiny under these lights. So keeping my forehead good and shiny. Kevin says, "What's up, Eric and Lance?" Big Mile High salute. It's not Lance today, but that's okay. I'm sorry I'm not better looking. That's what I'll go ahead and apologize for. Big Earn in here. Hello, Eric and Scott. Go Broncos country only. We may talk some other teams, but it might be just because they're Broncos opponents. That's okay, isn't it? Phil McLaughlin throwing some stars down. He says, "Evening, Eric and Deacon Scott." Welcome back, Eric. Hope you had a great vacation. And Michael Ranquillo says, "Good evening, Eric and Scott on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos and Buckham." And you predict this one. It wasn't a hard prediction. Wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins has been released by the Arizona Cardinals today. What's your reaction to that? What do you think, Eric?
I mean, it's not surprising. Everybody kind of expected he was going to be traded or released with a June 1st cut. Just the cost of it with where the Cardinals are at, it just didn't make sense to keep him. And just trading with the contract that he had, it was going to be difficult. So it's no surprise. I don't expect Denver to be in on it. But unfortunately, there's a couple teams in the division that have been linked with DeAndre Hopkins already, in both the Chiefs and the Chargers.
Yeah, one of the I want to look at his career earnings and what his dead cap is for 2022. I can't quite. I have to go to the Cardinals page to see what it is, because we had talked about compensation being a big deal for him. But if he's been cut, you don't necessarily have to worry about that as much, because he's already been compensated. Yep. He's already been paid for this year. So he's got a $22 million dead cap hit. Oy. So when you talk about what it might cost financially to bring in DeAndre Hopkins, well, whatever you pay him, add 22.6 to it, and that's his compensation for this year. So it might not take a ton of money to re-sign this guy because he's already gotten paid a ton. If you come in now, help me out here, Eric. I hate being negative on a Broncos show as kind of an outsider. I just feel like a player of his caliber who is all of a sudden a free agent will be looking, as you mentioned, at a team that has more realistic expectations for going to a Super Bowl and making a deep run in the playoffs right now than what the Denver Broncos are, at least early in the season. Now 3 games in and they're 3-0 and he's still out there. Maybe, hey, I want to jump on that bandwagon. But right now, you're not talking about him as being the Broncos as being big-time playoff contenders, Super Bowl contenders. And that's what it takes to get a guy of this caliber after the big money free agents have already been signed.
And like, he's 30 years old. So ring chasing, that's where he's at this point in his career. We see it a lot. Once, these star players hit a certain age, they go ring chasing. That's why the Chiefs make so much sense. Mike Ronquillo has in the chat the Von Miller with the eye emoji. The Bills make another sense. They're a team that's still looking for another receiver to help out with Stephon Diggs after
Right.
Gabe Davis hasn't really stepped up a whole lot. Broncos, well, the expectations are, high, in a way, it's not Super Bowl high. It's maybe we can push for a playoff spot, but looking more like 9 or 10 wins. And after, spending his time on the Texans and with the Cardinals, where neither of them really had Super Bowl expectations, that's got to be a big part of what he's looking for at this point.
Right. And what I mean is from the early free agency, you hit on some free agents in Broncos country, but you paid market value or a little above market value. You're not getting a guy to come in and say, I want to come play there 1 year and try and win a Super Bowl and then sign my next big contract. He still has another big contract in him. You're not going to be able to sign him to that $20 million per for 4 years, that 4-year, $80 million contract that he's probably going to get, because you've already spent that money and you're finished on that. Now you're looking at 1-year deals, short term, et cetera, et cetera. And who are the 2 teams we just mentioned, Eric, that make sense to him? Buffalo Bills and Kansas City Chiefs. They have to be 1, 2, or 3 in Super Bowl odds right now, along with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah. And that's another team that I saw a bunch of Eagles people after he was released come out and say, Eagles should be in on him because he can fit in well with the receivers they do have. They have those top 2 guys, but they're lacking depth a little bit. And adding somebody like DeAndre Hopkins, who can be that 50-50 ball guy, allowing A.J. Brown to be kind of more of the possession, yards after the catch receiver, and then Devontae Smith, more of the speedster. Like, you get a well-rounded top 3 there in Philadelphia, and that can just make them more of a threat. So they were really pounding the table for it. And Chase Waldner actually came in with another point too. Bring run first team, that's going to deter Hopkins. I had no doubt in my mind. He's a guy who's still going to want the ball a little bit while chasing rings. And the Broncos have made it very clear. We are going to be a very heavy run team, probably more in like 70-30 run pass percentage.
That's a lot.
It is.
I mean, 56-44 is heavy. That was like what the Falcons were last year, and they were one of the top running teams. 60-40. I'll set the over-under at 60-40.
Yeah, 60-40s.
Yeah, 70-30 is a ton. That's a ton. That's throwing it maybe 20 times a game. And you'll probably have a couple games where you only throw it 20, but I think you'll have some in there where you throw it 40 to help balance those out some. Gary Palmer coming in. Appreciate you, Gary, coming in with the big yellow super chat. Says, good evening, Eric and Scott. Love to Broncos country. That's all, y'all. Go Broncos and buck 'em with the B. Jesse Hilborn says, afternoon, everyone. Hello to you and Bama X. And you have to help me with the pronunciation. I would just say Ned, but he says sup, and I want to say hello as well. So, but the spelling for someone whose name is, Scott, that's gonna throw me off too. So, also, we had another one come in here. Colby C. Collier comes in with some stars. Thank you for the support, Colby. Says, how's it going, guys? Wonder who you think our kicker is going to be or should be. And Eric, while you were gone, Brandon McManus was cut. Now, and probably Jacob Martin too. You were probably gone when that move was done. Now, before the season, during the offseason, we put Jacob Martin on that. There's no way he is here on this contract list. That he lasted until May was a little odd to me. McManus was on the watch list. We weren't too sure about whether he'd make it or not, but I don't think anybody's surprised that he's on the not list.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it was always he's going to be the kicker, and that was only because at the time he was the only kicker they had. And I really expected them to bring in some kicker either during the draft or just after to help add competition to it and let them compete. But it makes perfect sense as to why he's out. McManus, I mean, the cost is a big reason why. Mm-hmm. Then there's also the on the field and off field stuff there. I mean, it's not like super bad stuff, but he picks fights with people on Twitter when they make fun of him for a missed field goal. There's the issues of him throwing fits on the sideline when the head coach won't let him go out there and kick a 70-yard field goal. Like these are issues too. Then there's the whole thing of, that union reps they tell people the players not to show up to voluntary mini camps. And so McManus was doing that. And there's been some rumblings that was an issue for, the new coach and everything, and leading to, just the change of the culture in the locker room. I'm not surprised he's gone. As for who the new kicker is going to be, I have no clue. I haven't had a chance to really look at it. Brandon McManus was cut literally when we were flying back into Anchorage. It was when we were going into landing that I got the notification for it, and it's just been a busy last couple days. So I haven't had a chance to look at who's still available or anything, so I'm not sure. I know they brought in the one Cowboys kicker who missed all those extra points. I would rather not him, but that's all I know on that aspect.
It'd be a nice redemption story, but it's a little scary also. I mean, and he'd be on a short leash. What he missed 4 in a row. And did I call him Jason McManus yet? I've written down Jason McManus is the only other McManus I know, and he's a fraternity brother of mine. And I have had to proofread headlines on videos about 4 times because I just automatically write Jason McManus. So Fish, his nickname was Fish. Fish, how you doing? If you're out there, I'm thinking about you because of Brandon McManus. The kicker though, Colby, I don't know either. I know they matter, but they're not high on my list of priorities as far as who's out there. Who am I looking at? I don't know. We know they're going to bring in a bunch of guys and they're going to try and choose. And the problem with kickers is there's a zillion guys out there that can kick it from 50 plus yards. They're a dime a freaking dozen. So you don't know what you got until you put them out there in front of 65,000 fans that are screaming for you to miss. And then you've got an idea. So it's really hard to evaluate kickers. You look at the leg, but how do they do it under pressure? And that's really impossible to tell until they're out there. Let me see. We on Colby here. We were talking D-Hop a little bit, and Keith Brugman says, my surprise team for Hopkins would be the Dolphins. They got to run out of money soon, don't they?
Yeah, I'm not sure where they're at financially or anything like that, but I mean, they are a sneaky team for it. They have all that speed there at receiver, but you got to have a little bit more of that, or more than just that.
Yeah.
So that's actually a team, and I don't know if they were like actually linked or just somebody throwing it out there. I can't remember which, but I saw somebody talking about how the Dolphins would make sense for him for that reason. So.
String Guy comes in. He says, hey, Scott and Eric, what do you think about this new rule on kickoff returns? And do you agree with Andy Reid's comments about the rule? Now, I don't know 100% what the rule is. I saw someone say it was very similar to what the college is, which you can fair catch it and basically at the 5 and get the ball on the 20, 25. I think that's what it is. If so, or if not, please confirm.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I did a quick Google search because I remember it, but I couldn't remember the specifics of it. So it specifies that the fair catch on a free kick must occur behind the team's 25-yard line in order for the ball to be placed at the 25-yard line. Mm-hmm. It's change will be for 1 year only, with the league citing player safety as a reason for proposal. The kickoff play for us, this is from Rich McKay, the chairman of NFL's competition committee. The kickoff play for us has been a play that has had a lot of changes for us over the years, all really driven by health and safety. It cites the concussion rate and how it's supposedly supposed to drop it. But yeah, after a fair catch is made or is awarded as a result of a fair catch interference, the receiving team has the option of putting the ball in play either a fair catch kick from the spot of the catch, or unless I lost where I was at here.
All right, so here let me shorten this up for you. I've got some poison pill questions for this. These are setups for you. So why are they saying that they're putting this rule in place?
Player safety.
Player safety. How is this more safe for the players?
So from what they cite is that it dropped concussion rate from 38 to 31%.
Why?
That I don't
Because
know.
they're not returning kickoffs. So their idea for player safety is to give the team a better option to not return the kickoffs. Let me put this another way. Their idea for player safety is to not return kickoffs. Let's just get rid of the damn kickoff. Let's just get rid of it. That's what I think about it, String Guy. It is a waste of time. These guys can boot it through the end zone anytime they want to, and if they return it, the players are in danger.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of the damn kickoffs. That's my idea. That's what I think about it. We're going to put in a rule that helps you stay safe by not returning the kickoffs. Well, then don't kick off. That's what I think, String Guy. It's 10 minutes a game that you don't need anymore.
That's kind of to the point where I'm at. Is kickoffs. I mean, they've done so many changes to it. They changed it to where the blockers can't link up arms.
You moved it back to the 30, but then people were getting hurt because you were running farther.
Yeah, so they've done a lot of things about it. It's like it's gotten to the point. Just get rid of it. If you're consistently citing player safety for the reason because it's such a dangerous play, then do away with it because it's not a very exciting play for me unless they manage to find that hole, which happens once every 15 kickoffs or so. Not a high enough rate for it to be exciting. It slows down the pace of the game. Just get rid of it and just start every team on the 20-yard line, 25-yard line, wherever.
String Guy, I'm working my way down the chat. That's exactly what I think. I don't know if you follow me on Twitter, but that's what I put out the other day. I'm like, it's an outdated concept, the kickoff, the way it is. If you don't care about the players, then so be it. Move it back to the 20 and kick off. If you want to do it for player safety and you're limiting their ability to return it because of their safety, then just don't return it at all. It's just get rid of it. So that's what I think on it. And they've talked about the XFL rule. I didn't watch any XFL. I think they started like 10 yards apart or something like that. And it was almost a running play. I don't know, but it's definitely, for me, it's definitely just get rid of it. How you start a game. How do you start a game? Orange colored glasses asks, how do you start a game? You win the toss, you set the ball on the 25.
Yeah.
Simple. The same way you do now, except you get rid of the charade of kicking the ball through the end zone first and save that extra 2 or 3 minutes. And the thing is, it's not costing anybody any jobs. That's the point is, you worry about, well, am I eliminating somebody's job? No, I'm not, because that's one of those, the DH or not to DH, extra bullpen, extra arms, you're not getting rid of you're not getting rid of somebody's jobs. Not exciting, not anymore. The start of the Super Bowl doesn't start with a kickoff and flash bulbs. You start on the 25, boo. I think the flash bulbs would still start on the first snap. So I just I just think it's outdated. Just kicking the ball through the end zone for a ceremonious flash bulb. I'm not interested. You know what I am interested, though? Some of the comments that Sean Payton has had this week, including on Javonte Williams. And we all kind of raised our eyebrows when they said, yeah, he should be ready for training camp. He doubled down on that. He also said that Jerry Jeudy was fine, just a thigh bruise, a little contusion. And he also had some interesting comments on Kareem Jackson, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, when Kareem Jackson was signed, I was not the happiest of campers just because we've just slowly watched Kareem Jackson decline. But one thing that Sean Payton said is a good point is that despite his age, he's still out there on the field. He's consistently out there on the field, and he is somewhat reliable as a player still. He's lost a step. He's not as quick. He's not as quick as rotations, but he's got solid instincts when coming downhill against the run. So he still can be a solid depth guy. And for a team that is lacking depth at safety, it was nice to bring a veteran back in. I expect Simmons and Stearns to be the starters, but Kareem Jackson is a solid, I guess, versatile third option there. When the Broncos, they just didn't have that veteran insurance there.
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of the signing. But the thing is we are just previously we'd been screaming about the safety depth. Everybody wants to just pencil in Caden Stearns like he's some sure thing, Eric. He's played 5 games. I mean, he had 5 starts in 2 years. He's coming off of an injured season. The sample size for him is tiny. I'm not ready to say that this guy's the answer at safety. So I think bringing in somebody, I just don't know if the answer was Kareem Jackson.
Yeah.
And he's not expensive. Real quick, and then I want to throw it back to you on the safety position. Zebulon says Devin Hester never would have made it in the NFL without kickoffs. Devin Hester had 14 punt returns for touchdowns in his career. He had 5 kickoff returns for touchdowns. They still punt. They still have returns and still be a 5th receiver. Devin Hester would have made it in the NFL.
Yeah, and with Caden Stearns, this is a point that I've made often, even throughout the draft season, whenever I'd say, you talk about safety being a sneaky need for the team. Caden Stearns has played less than 600 snaps over 2 seasons.
He's played less than Damari Mathis in a Denver Broncos uniform.
Yep.
That's
this is a guy you have penciled in to be the starter. And while he had his flashes, I think everybody goes back to I can't remember which game specifically in his rookie season where he had a couple huge plays. I'm trying to remember what one it was. It was later in the season. It was but he had a couple big plays against it, came downhill, blew up a couple runs, blew up a screen. But he was very inconsistent. And even this last year, he was inconsistent, especially triggering downhill against the run, hitting the wrong lanes, leaving a lane open. It was such an issue for me to, even if he didn't get hurt, to be confident in him being a starter without more competition. And then you add in the hip injury, like a hip injury that at first they were expecting him back after 4 or 5 games and ended up causing him to miss the rest of the season. So that's also a big issue for me.
How quickly do you think we could see JL Skinner on the field?
If I remember right, just after he was drafted, it came out that he's expected to be ready near the start of the season, if not before it. I think we could see him pretty quickly, especially if Caden Stearns doesn't take a huge step forward. I think they want to get him out there on the field early. From things I've heard, before the injury, or without the injury, they would have had him, considered him much earlier than they took him. Injury helped him fall. So I think they have a clear role what they want to do with him, and they want to get him out there on the field as quickly as they can.
I think he could be a real asset in run coverage early on. He's such an interesting athlete. His first step, he covers so much ground in his first 2 steps. He's got those long strides that you're going to walk him up almost as an old-fashioned outside linebacker at times. Cover the slot. And, oh, yeah, I'm there for the run, too. I think he's a very intriguing player. Someone else who made some headlines this week, Eric, just, one of the media availability guys who really impressed a lot of Broncos country was Mike McGlinchey. Mike, very well-spoken. And I like him because in a day of everybody trying to make up new names to sound all fancy about what the game of football is, he says this game's pretty simple. Job 1A is establish a running game. Job 1B is keep the defensive lineman off of the quarterback. Wide zone this, stretch that. It's all pretty simple. The 11 guys are still playing the same game. Like, thank you. I love this guy already. So very interesting.
Yeah, one thing that I always liked about Mike McGlinchey was that he just was always, whenever he would speak to the media, he was always just very obvious and blunt and speaking, just honestly to about with his answers and everything like that. And just, it's very obvious. The job, especially in this, one of the quotes that I saw too was he was talking about how easy it is to pick up Sean Payton's scheme because it's just very basic old school stuff. And just he builds more complications or complexity off of that, and so it's very easy to pick up. Mike McGlinchey was one that I don't want to say I hated the signing. I had my reservations about it, but he's quickly winning me over. Biggest thing for me still is keeping him out there on the field because he's got a pretty scary injury history. But listening to him talk, catching up on some of the quotes that he's had, like he's a guy that's good for this offensive line and the locker room because he's just so level-headed.
I have a question for you. I didn't prep you on this one. Russell Wilson said that Mike McGlinchey has a presence. He's 6'8" and 300 something pounds. I mean, he's a yes, he has a presence. So the get off the bus team. Pick two guys who you would pick to get off the bus first for the Denver Broncos.
Oh, Mike McGlinchey would definitely be one of them.
Mike McGlinchey's one of them, yeah.
And part of me wants to go Quinn Miners, as long as he has his shirt up a little bit with the belly out. Like, as long as that's there. DJ Jones or Mike Purcell for me would also be up there. Mike Purcell can have a little bit of that intimidating presence as well.
You know who I went with? Randy Gregory.
That's a good one.
I mean, like, some of the most intimidating people on the planet are NBA power forwards.
Yeah.
You know, they're not like, if you see NBA players in person, they're kind of strange looking. I mean, you know, 6'8", 190 pounds, you know, 6'9", 175, you know, that's a little strange, but you know, you go 6'8", 225, 230, like these power, you know, and then you've got some really gigantic men, I know, but on average, they're scary looking. Randy Gregory, 6'6", 250 pounds.
Yeah.
You get Randy Gregory and Mike McGlinchey getting off the bus first. That might be where I was going. But Purcell's a good shout too. But yeah, McGlinchey does have a presence. That's for sure. Here's a good question from Harold Jean coming in. He says, would anybody be mad if June 1st we cut Courtland Sutton, then signed DeAndre to a 2-year deal?
I think at this point, first of all, I think at this point, Courtland Sutton's going to be on the roster at least until the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. If they're going to post June 1st cut him, I think they probably would have by now. But if Denver did do that, I think I would be a little bit upset. Because DeAndre Hopkins, as talented as he is, I remember watching some Arizona games this last year and even Texans games before he was traded and over the years. And watching DeAndre Hopkins just stand there as a blocker and not really do a whole lot, like, at least Courtland Sutton would try most of the time. So I'd be a little bit upset. I mean, you're going to be a run-heavy team. Like, keep the guy who at least gives an effort 75% of the time compared to the high-profile, somewhat prima donna wide receiver that gives an effort only like 10% of the time.
And for me, this question was more about Courtland Sutton than DeAndre Hopkins. You know, you mentioned the trade deadline as a factor. And just for me, just looking at the contract, the way it stands, man, it just does not make sense it's like taking your 401k out early. You know, you're going to get penalized. If you just wait one more year, play with Courtland Sutton this year, and the financial benefits of if you were to make a change next year, mm-hmm. they're exponentially better. I mean, if he has to be gone, I've said this for 5 months now. If you move Courtland Sutton, it's not a football decision. It's not a talent-based decision. It means something is up with Courtland Sutton, Sean Payton, the locker room. He's asked to be traded. There's something more going on than the talent he brings to the field, because financially it just doesn't make sense to move him this year.
Yeah, and that's something that with Courtland Sutton that I've highlighted a lot. For me, it's always been keep him until next year. Try to build up his value this year, because they had teams interested in trading for him for a pair of day 3 picks. And that was it. So try to build his value back up. You know, maybe you can have more stability on offense and, you know, see him hit, you know, that 1K yard mark and just build that value up and look at trading him then. And if you can't, it makes a lot more sense financially to cut him. It was the same thing I said with Justin Simmons, with Garrett Bowles, when all those rumors were going about. It just didn't make sense to make a whole lot of changes to the roster this year with these guys because of how their contracts are set up. Courtland Sutton, again, let him try to build up value again. Look at moving on from him next March, April, May.
All right. You said, you know, a couple of second round, you know, a couple of day 3 picks or something. All right. And part of that is the financials that you would be saddled with as well. So you're hoping I can get out from under his contract, because he doesn't have a lot of his money tied up in a bonus. A lot of it is base salary, which means he's more flexible to move on from. So for 2019, that's 4 years ago already. He's coming off his second year. He's still only 27 years old, if I'm not mistaken. He's 27, and in 2019, 24 years old, coming off 1,000 yards, 6 touchdown Pro Bowl season in his second year. What could you have gotten for Courtland Sutton then?
I think that with the right team, a team that's right on that cusp of competing for a Super Bowl or even like conference championship, just right on that cusp, I think he probably could have gotten a third and another day 3 pick.
I don't see it. You see what these guys are going for. To get a 24-year-old player coming off a Pro Bowl season, 1,100 yards, and I see what it's costing to get receivers now. I'm thinking at least a first-round pick, and I just don't think he's fallen that far since then for him to be worth a 6th and a 7th now. But if you say a 3rd and a 6th, then maybe it makes more sense. A cost-controlled rookie, that's part of it too. He'd still be on a rookie contract, but the receivers have gotten so expensive financially that people are really going out of their way to draft them a little bit higher than you might think. And if you can move on from them and get something before you have a second round. What did the Chiefs get for Tyreek Hill? I know he wasn't Tyreek Hill, but it was a haul. What did AJ Brown go for the second time? Like a third? He didn't go that high. He didn't go that high to the Eagles. But what did Tyreek go for? How about Devontae Adams?
Let's see here. AJ Brown was a first-round pick. The Eagles gave a first-round pick to the Titans. Let's see. Trying to find for Tyreek Hill now.
Tyreek Hill was a first. I bet it was one of those San Francisco 49ers firsts.
2022 first-round pick, second-round pick, 2 fourth-round picks, and a 2023 sixth-round pick.
I know that's, Courtland Sutton's not Tyreek Hill, but we're talking about a second-year player who went to the Pro Bowl with 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns.
Yeah,
that's a prime asset. I just got to believe he would have been worth at least a first rounder, and I just don't think he's fallen off that far. As you said, give him a chance, give Courtland Sutton a chance to build him back up with some competent offensive play. Where Russ last year was, I don't know if it's OCD or what, but it's like, I'm going to start the season and I'm only going to throw it to Courtland Sutton. Well, you forgot to throw some to the backs, or you only threw it to the backs in the first game. Okay, well, we're only going to throw the ball downfield. Last 4 games, I'm just going to get it to Jerry Jeudy. You've got to have more balance all across the line, and that's the one thing I'm expecting more from Sean Payton in this offense. It's just the only way I can put it, Eric, is competency. Just competency. Yeah. And it should make everybody more valuable at the end of this year.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the big issues that I had with, and you and I talked about this a lot with Nathaniel Hackett and how much influence Russ had over the offense. Nathaniel Hackett never said no. Well, we don't have that issue with Sean Payton, so we got to see him, as you said, we got to see him play with more balance. Like breaking down the games last year, it was so frustrating watching him just consistently go to 1 or 2 receivers or targets every game more often than anybody else and not really spread the ball around. Because with Sean Payton's offense, for it to really work, you got to spread the ball around a little bit. They had that issue with Michael Thomas in New Orleans. Like they became easy to stop because you knew he was going to get the ball, but he was just so ridiculously talented. It didn't really matter a whole lot, but they always struggled to find that second guy. So Sutton, Jeudy, Tim Patrick coming back, you have the receivers to really spread it out. You have talent at tight end. You have talent at running back. There's no excuse for Russell Wilson not to spread it out, which should help Sutton build up his value. And last thing on Sutton, too, is one of the reasons why they didn't trade him, why those day 3 picks weren't good enough, is from what I understand, they were looking for a second round value, which could be, like a 3rd round pick and a 4th round pick or however, but they wanted that second round value just as they wanted that 1st round value for Jerry Jeudy and then more on top of it.
Yeah. And let me see who asked the question. Oh, it's Peter. Hello, Peter. I'm not sure what time it is here, but he says a Pro Bowl wide receiver for a late round question mark. I don't see the point unless there's a locker room issue with other wide receivers getting into the prime. It's not just that. It's the contract and freeing up cap space in order to address other areas on your team. But that's my biggest point, Peter, is you don't get the big benefit from his contract until next year. Next year is when it really becomes, all right, well, we'd almost be better off without this guy, whether we got anything back or not. based on the financial flexibility that we would then get in return. There was also, Keith Brugman asked a question. You're going to know the answer to this one from me. So maybe I'll have to say who's the second one. Who's the most expendable starter on this roster this year now that McManus is gone, if not Sutton? So I like the WAR, the wins against replacement stat in baseball, which just means what's this guy worth compared to an average player that I put in his place? So that's how I think about it. Who would have the worst WAR on this team? Because that person then becomes the most expendable, taking money out of the equation.
I mean, for me, it's probably Lloyd Cushenberry.
See, that's the easy one for me. It's
that's the easy one.
Easy to say Cushenberry. I think he's a negative WAR that an average replacement would make the team better.
So another one that I'd probably go with is actually a guy they just signed, Riley Dixon. Everybody really picked on Corliss Whitman last year. Super inconsistent. Riley Dixon was right there with Corliss Whitman in all the advanced stats for punters last year. They were almost like, here's 16, here's 17. And if whichever one was on top, you look at a different one, they were just flipped. So Dixon might be a little bit more consistent because Whitman, I mean, he had some of those huge boomers and Dixon didn't really have those. But it's still just, you want a little bit more from a punter, especially coming from an offense that struggled so much to move the ball. You got to have a guy who can flip the field a little bit. So Riley Dixon for me is one. I didn't like the move when they signed him, and I continued to hound for bringing in another punter for competition for him.
I'm going to lead you into this one. I love this question, Keith. I'm going to lead you into this one based on how I described it with the WAR, with the negative WAR, and then let's throw in the financial. If you become a liability instead of an asset because of your contract, you're expendable. Mm-hmm. What player on offense last year had the big number and the negative WAR?
Russell Wilson?
Russell Wilson is the answer to that question, Keith.
Yeah.
It becomes Russell Wilson. Now, he becomes a little more expendable. The problem is he's not quite expendable yet because his dead cap hit would then become a detriment to your team.
Yeah.
But after this year, it becomes a little more easy to work with, especially when you have to make a decision whether you want to pony up $40 million. That's what's so interesting, Eric, is come beginning of March next year, you have to make a 2-year decision on Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
I know where I'm leaning right now. Let's ask that same question on the defensive side of the ball. Negative WAR, high dollars, dead cap kind of goes away next year.
Justin Simmons.
I think Justin Simmons is a good player, though. I think he's got a positive WAR.
I think he's good. It's just over the years, I mean, he's another one that you see this big splash plays, and those always tend to overlook the really negative plays that he has. Another one that I would look at too is Randy Gregory, just because he can't stay out there on the field.
That was mine. It had to be. It was Randy Gregory because he doesn't get a wins at all because he's not out there. So if he's not out there, then I guess that would be kind of cheating because then do you really even still consider him a starter? So, you know, in the first 22 on week 1, if everybody's healthy, if he is a starter, then you want him on the field. So that is cheating a little bit. But that's who I was thinking, Eric, was of the guys that should be in the first 22, who's like the least likely to be here, who becomes expendable in the next year. So that was one of my answers was Randy Gregory. Phil asks, and appreciate the stars, Phil, if Cortland Sutton plays like his Pro Bowl year under Payton's offense, would you still get rid of him? For me, the answer is a no. Everybody's for sale. Everybody has a price. Thank you, $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. Everybody's got a price. But I'm not shopping him. I'm not actively shopping him out there. I would, and his contract's not terrible. I think he was like 20th in average pay last year. Not too bad. You know, and I think he's got the ability to outplay what he is being compensated. If you do that, you hang on to the man. He'd still be just 28 years old, prime for a receiver should be 28 to 32. So I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it depends on a lot of other things too, because part of it is what does happen with Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson's not to that point where you're going to make that 2-year additional investment into him, then maybe I'd be a little bit more open to moving Sutton.
Just the opposite, Eric. If I need to come up with some cap space in order to eat that giant dead cap number on Russell Wilson, where can I find it next year?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense too. And it's also Garrett Bowles plays a factor in it. Mm-hmm. It basically comes to is like, are you at that point where you're going to try to tear things down and rebuild it? Because at that point, it's a question of how much of an impact is Courtland Sutton. What does Tim Patrick do when he's coming back? Does Jerry Jeudy take that next step? Because you're getting to a point where you have to pay Jerry Jeudy. Marvin Mims also plays a factor in it. So there's a lot to it. I would lean no to keeping Sutton no matter what, if he is able to play like his Pro Bowl year. But again, it's like, as you said, Scott, if somebody comes offering a good, pile of draft picks for him, I definitely consider it. But I wouldn't be the one making the calls and saying, what would you give us for him?
Right. Yeah. Everybody's got a price.
Yeah.
The price might be, well, I want 3 first-round picks. Well, you're already mine. Well, he's not for sale. So everybody's got a price. But I think Sutton's financially this year for sure. And then we'll see. It again depends on his contract and Tim Patrick's contract.
Yeah.
And I know Nick has said Jerry Jeudy will be on his 5th-year option. He's going to get a big acceleration. He'll be an 8-figure contract. You're not going to have 3 8-figure guys, 10 million plus wide receivers next year. One of them's got to go. Who's it going to be? That's something to think of as well. Gary coming in asks a good question. He says, why is KJ Hamler not being talked about? We brought in Mims and he becomes expendable.
I mean, I think that's exactly why. I think everybody knows KJ Hamler at this point is expendable. It was talked a lot about leading up to the draft that KJ Hamler, they're looking for a replacement. They're looking for more speed on the offense, more reliable speed to stay out there on the field. It's well known that KJ Hamler is expendable. Depending on obviously how training camp and preseason goes out, I'm leaning towards KJ Hamler being off the roster. And one of the articles I'm actually working up is divvying up all the players into 3 categories based on percentages of how likely they are to make the roster. And I think I have KJ Hamler currently in the lowest tier of it, which is like 0 to, I think, 36% chance to make the roster.
Well, we're at 48 minutes. I want to get to this question. We're at 48 minutes, so we're going to be getting out of here pretty quickly. So if you got any last burning desires, make sure you get them in before we leave here in the next few minutes. But Gary, my simple answer to this one, I guess it might not be so simple, is expendable means that he was there to begin with. That he was being counted on. Expendable means I had him and I don't need him. He's got 640 yards in 3 years. Dulcich almost had that in half a season last year. Yeah. KJ Hamler has not been a factor for the Denver Broncos since he's been drafted. It's not even expendable is not the word that I used to think of that. I just think of he hasn't been out there. He's a liability. He's not surplus to requirements because you can't count on him to be out there at all, period. So he has contributed almost 0 to Denver in 3 years. That's why he's not being talked about, Gary. As harsh as that sounds, that's why. And I know that sounds harsh.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you're not wrong at all, and I agree with it. For me, it's just like the one thing that I try to avoid doing is I try to avoid locking on those splash plays. But with KJ Hamler, I always come back to those splash plays because when he's out there on the field and he's used, we see what he can do. But you're exactly right. We get him for 3, 4, maybe 5 games a season, and that's it. And this last year, especially with Russell Wilson, there just wasn't a match there. Going back to that Colts game, I mean, KJ Hamler, he had the game winner right there, and Russell Wilson doesn't even look his way. And that was just one of many plays. So they don't mesh well. So that just makes KJ Hamler even more, not one of those guys that you can rely on top of the injuries, on top of everything else.
So Michael coming in saying, great show tonight, Eric and Scott on the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Go Broncos and buck 'em. Keith says, my burning desire is to know how deep Scott's fandom is in WWF wrestling. I was an Atlanta guy, so I was NWA way back then before the WF started coming up on what they call it. It was Friday night. I forgot what they call it. And then it was like, oh, these were cool. Back in the day, they never had any decent matches on. Everything was, you had to go to the arenas because that's where they made all their money. They didn't make any of their money in TV, but it goes way back. My mom would not let me watch wrestling. I had a little TV. I mean, old TVs were like 9 inches big. And I used to like turn the sound all the way down. And I'd be watching, Ric Flair and Tony Atlas and Junkyard Dog and the Road Warriors and all those guys. So I haven't watched it in years. So it's kind of like NBA for me, Eric. Like up until about 2000, I know all the wrestlers. And after 2000, my life kind of changed a little bit. And so did the sport. So that was a big wrestling fan.
Last time I watched wrestling was like 1999, 1998. And it was when the Undertaker body slammed Big Show. That was the last wrestling match I watched. Ever since then, I just don't pay attention to it. So I can name you a few wrestlers just because I've heard them mentioned on other things, but not a big wrestling guy.
I actually listened to Chris Jericho's band. He's got a rock band called Fozzy, and they're good. I actually listened to them. So there's some of the stuff I really like, and he was so awesome on the mic. He was freaking hilarious. Made me want to be a wrestler when I was in my 20s. Like, I want to be that guy. He's cool. The good question, Keith asks, he says, oh, it was a good question. So good question from Zebulon, I think that was. If Hamler doesn't tear his pec, does Denver even draft Mims? I think yes. Yep. I think, in fact, Zebulon, I couldn't even told you. It's like dead or alive. Crap, I don't know. Did he tear his pec before or after the draft? I'm not 100% sure because to me, it wouldn't have mattered. Yeah. Like I said, 640 yards in 3 seasons. That's not a guy. If he wasn't a second round pick, he'd already be gone. If he was a 6th round pick, he would already be gone. He's gotten the benefit of the doubt because they put a big draft pick on him, and those guys get the benefit of the doubt longer than the undrafted free agents and the 6th rounders that have to work harder for everything they get. He'd already be gone. So yes, Mims is still being drafted.
Yeah, one of the worst kept secrets through January and February was that the Broncos, even before Sean Payton was hired, the Broncos wanted reliable speed at the receiver position, somebody who can stay out there on the field because KJ Hamler unfortunately couldn't be that. And Orange Colored Glasses says that it seemed dumping hard on a guy for getting injured, which doesn't seem right. It's I don't want to say it's right or wrong, but it's just the way it is. He's a guy who's been hurt a lot. And unfortunately, it means that we're not seeing him on the field and he's unable to contribute. So I think that no matter what, I think the Broncos are going to draft a receiver who could bring a lot of speed to the offense.
Yeah, and we're not. You could say I'm dumping on him, but the cold hard facts are you have to make a business decision, and you've got a 53-man roster and a salary cap, and a guy who has 640 yards in 3 years, he ain't going to make it. Yeah. He ain't going to make it. Sorry. Is Dulcich going to have the most receptions this year if healthy? No, I don't think so. I think most receptions could go to Pirine.
I would think that.
I mean, Alvin Kamara had 84 straight years.
I think for me, just breaking down the top 4, I think we're going to have 2 receivers, a tight end, and a running back in the top 4 most receptions this year. I'd probably put it wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, tight end. That's probably the order I would put it, with Dulcich being that tight end.
Yeah, the question we got is yesterday or the day before was, does Dulcich lead the tight ends? And I said yes, but lined up as a wide receiver. Yeah. Most of his catches will come when he's coming out of the slot. So on that note, I think we are going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody for showing up. Let me see if I can run through some of these banners here. So this was the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast, and make sure you're following the mothership on the MHH pod or at Mile High Huddle. A good place to come get your merch for those Buckham shirts. Also, the links are in the descriptions of any show as mhhmerch.com. Please follow Eric and myself. That's at Erick Trickel. I can be found at Scout Kennedy. That's all I've got. I will be back with the guys. Actually, I'm with Zach Sunday night. So I'm guest hosting Friday night and Sunday night. So you'll get to see me again. Eric, we'll see you again next Friday.
Yep.
All right. Any last words before we get out of here for OTAs?
And Lance should be back next Friday as well. So back to us too. But I don't really have any last words tonight. Just hope everybody stays safe this weekend and has a wonderful weekend and a wonderful, wonderful holiday weekend.
Oh, yeah. And remember why we're celebrating. And I will see y'all on Sunday night, 6 o'clock Mountain. Everybody have a great weekend. And thanks for being with us tonight.